episode 15.
Welcome to Conscious Guys Get Laid More. We have a special guest today, Alycia. Say hi to everyone.
Hello, America and beyond.
Two of you.
So that everybody knows, the two listeners of our podcast are me and Alycia. My wife, nope, doesn't listen. Andy, nope. Doesn't listen. So this will be enjoyable for you and I to listen later.
I can't wait to re-listen to ourselves.
Yeah. Do you listen to your Conscious Girls Drink Champagne podcast?
Sometimes, unless I'm particularly nervous about it, then I try to avoid it.
Oh, nice. How long does that last?
Sometimes a month, sometimes like 6,
Nice. Very cool. Are you glad to be here? We're super excited to have you.
Oh God, I'm super glad. And I feel like this is just proof that all of my pestering and being mean and razzing you guys pays off.
It does.
You're our first guest.
Second, but that's okay.
Who's our first?
Well, the first two were your wife and Grace.
Oh, that's right. She actually arbitrated our conversation for us.
She did. Yeah,
that's right.
And then you called Marcella too.
She called me
during a podcast,
and I picked up. She was not happy about that. She got so nervous.
No, I'm super honored, and I feel like, it only makes sense that the conscious guys and gals get together. But the sad part of it all is that our other conscious gal is not here.
She's MIA.
know.
She'll be here later.
Yeah.
Not today. At a later.
I promised her I would get very sad and afraid, because those are the two emotions she won't miss out on the most. So I'm going to try to bring those emotions out the most.
All right.
Yeah. We'll try not to be angry or happy.
No.
She likes those.
Really miss out on that.
She likes those.
Yeah. Exactly.
So for our podcast today, because we are Conscious Guys Get Laid More, and we are all about a value-driven life.
Yes.
Just like the one and only James Frazier lives. We have some topics.
We do.
Did you watch Outlander?
No, I thought I was thinking about Frasier, like my favorite Frasier, like
No.
Frasier Crane.
No. You need to watch Outlander. Yeah.
It's a soap opera on a cable channel that has a lot of Scottish Highland scenery, women and men, time travel, and sex. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Shows every man on this podcast how to live.
Shows you how to live.
That's right. I've never seen it.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'll put that on my list.
Outlander.
You can just do like an Instagram search, hashtag Outlander, and you'll get a gist of what's on there. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just follow the people on Instagram and call it a day.
That might work too.
You won't get the sexy sex scenes.
Right. Well, might have to make it happen then.
So anyway, so just like James Frazier lives a value-driven life, we are here to lead value-driven lives as men, with the underlying purpose of getting laid more, because we believe conscious guys get laid more eventually. So thank you, Alycia, for listening to every single one of our episodes and with Conscious Guys Get Laid More. I think you had a couple of things that you wanted to say to me in regards to some of our past experiences together. What are those things?
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like every episode I think of something, but the last one was really funny because you guys were talking about whether or not you like to do dishes and how you like to live your lives and clean versus dirty and whatever. And then Lyndon said that he really enjoys doing dishes even whilst people are still at his house because it makes him feel better or whatever. And I just reflected back to like in college days where like he would like do dishes at my house if we had like a party, and I'd wake up and the house would be amazingly clean. I'm like, this is the best ever.
It would be clean. And you would not have any more carrots because I would typically eat all of your carrots.
Oh my God, I know. I do think there was a Thanksgiving one year. Do you remember this? Where like, I think you and I were the only ones left in town because everyone went home because we were the only ones who actually had jobs.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm pretty sure I made a turkey just for us too.
Yeah. That was good. That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Alycia and I go back to college. We've been friends for how many years?
Well, at first I didn't like you, so we can't count that. So like maybe like junior year.
Not so conscious back then, huh?
No, I just kind of, I don't know. Sometimes I just say things that are on my mind and some people take offense to them until they get to know me and they're like, oh, he's just truthful. And I like the fact that he's always truthful.
Yeah, you definitely, and sometimes I can be like a hard judge of character where I'm like, I just quick to like cut people like, no.
She doesn't remember this. I don't think Alycia remembers this. And Cassie denies it, but Cassie and Alycia were not friends when they first met. They were frenemies.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
What? How do you remember that?
Yeah. I remember hearing conversations
about it. Yeah. You weren't.
I'm so glad that changed because look at what's come out of it.
Yeah. No, I'm like, not, I mean, I don't remember that specifically. I'm sure it's true, but I don't necessarily let people in quickly, which is good and bad. So,
Yeah, well.
So I don't remember that about our relationship. I thought we were pretty fast friends, but maybe I'm mistaken.
No, I think we were, but I think you had like the safety context of like PL in the middle.
I see.
Yeah, you were kind of a business associate first, and then, oh, he's a cool guy.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Although I don't know. Some of my coworkers that I have now, it take a while. I'm like 6 months, 12 months. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll go to happy hour with you. Maybe.
Maybe these fuckers, Jesus.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
You know what I realized that they do on every one of their podcasts is they go through a protocol before they start their podcast.
Mm-hmm.
One of which their protocol is to pop a bottle of champagne. We should create a protocol for the conscious guys.
I love a protocol.
So whiskey, yeah.
Pop a bottle of whiskey before every episode.
Yeah.
That could get expensive, but yeah.
It's expensive.
Champagne isn't expensive. What do you buy for your champagne?
No, I mean, we don't always do the protocol.
Oh,
whoa.
I know, but don't tell anyone. No, but we did have, at one point we made it like when we first started the podcast, and it says like eat nuts, like literal nuts, because we had a whole episode about how nuts are like currency and like whatever. And then the other one was like get gifts, because one time you guys gave us a gift and we're like, oh, we need to do this every podcast.
Well, there you go, folks.
Cute. All right.
We'll have to come up with what that is.
Okay.
A protocol for us, because I really enjoyed it when I was on their Conscious Girls podcast last week or 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
it was very enjoyable. All right, we got a couple of topics that we decided to discuss today. One of which is sex. And one of which is feminism. Which one should we start with?
Guest chooses.
Guest choice. Yeah.
Wow, what an honor. A thrill, really. I think let's do feminism.
Feminism.
Okay. Let's do it.
How would we talk? What's the conversation that we should discuss regarding feminism?
I feel like Mr. Andy, who you can email at andy@productivelearning.com, was the one who brought it up.
I like having a listener on. They just know what's going on.
They know the protocol.
Yeah.
Send everybody to Andy. Boom. Yeah. So let me fumble through this again. So there's this, I was having a conversation with someone a while ago, and they asked me this question: what's the opposite of patriarchy? Right? And immediately I think of matriarchy, right? You just swap one precedent for the other. And the truth is that the opposite of patriarchy is equality. It's not actually matriarchy. And so getting to the concept of equality requires that both voices and perspectives and whatever other voices and perspectives in the conversation get to be heard, so that then equality can actually form. And a lot of times when things go through changes, there's a pendulum that swings from one extreme, and then it swings over toward the other extreme, and then it eventually finds this balance toward equality and at the bottom. And right now, and for the last however many years, feminism has really been rising. You know, it started when women wanted the goddamn vote. I mean, how horrible was that for some people, and how amazing was it for others? And you know, through the 50s and 60s, there's these values of what a woman should be and the roles she should play and how she should look and dress and all this shit. And then now we're at this point where a woman can choose and do whatever she wants, except potentially get paid an equal amount for the same job or role, right? And so there's this glass ceiling, and there's all these obstacles and things that men don't even think about. Karen brings up one to me all the time. Like, do you even think about, you know, what it's like to walk to your car at night in a parking lot? And I'm like, no, I don't. It doesn't even fucking cross my mind. And so like so there's just perspectives and things that don't even cross guys' minds with regard to feminism. And there's this threat that sometimes happens to this persona that at least I've had of what a woman is, and how she what I would recognize as a woman, right? And as a feminist, and as another human being of the softer gender. And then when feminism comes in and says you can do anything you want, that ideal is threatened now because that's taken away. But that's not actually true. It's still one of the choices, but people don't always relate to it that way. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. And like my take on that is interesting too, because my journey, like I think both of you probably know that like historically, Alycia tends to avoid polarizing conversations because the idea of putting out my like political opinion or what have you is like, truth be told, like horrifying to me. And usually I just make jokes and avoid the topic completely. And like one time I was in a workshop and I think we were given the topic of gun control to just like have the conversation. And I remember being like so uncomfortable and like watched myself just like make jokes and try to hope to God that no one asked me for my opinion. But over the last several years, however, I don't really know why this has taken place, but I feel like for me, I've gotten more and more passionate about like my role as a woman and feminism and what it means and how it plays out in my life. And so it's kind of interesting to see like what you're talking about in terms of like, there's things you guys don't think of just because it's not in your purview. And then there's people like me who are like afraid of saying certain things because I'm like, I don't want to have the fact that like I'm speaking up about this alienate our male counterparts to the point where it's like counterproductive. So then I just take like the silent road. But I remember at my previous like 2 jobs ago or however many jobs ago, there was this conference and an offshoot of it, like, I don't know, like a reception or something was like women in private equity. And I was like, oh, I'm super excited to go to this. I want to see what it's about, blah, blah. But like men could go too. And like the guys who were in the room, granted it was like, 1% or whatever. I was like, that's actually kind of really cool that like they're showing their support and like want to be there and hear about our issues in the industry. But at the same time, like kind of, I think this is a really long-winded way of saying that like part of my fear of like calling out that we're separate is only furthering the idea that we're separate, as opposed to like some women I've talked to have talked about like, no, we shouldn't create separate women's initiatives and women's groups because that only furthers the belief that like we're so different and we're so separate.
Do you think that your fear of voicing your opinion is a female issue, or is it an Alycia voicing an opinion regardless of her sex issue? And I did ask the question as to like either or, and maybe it's not either or, it could be a combination. And you could speak to that, but how much do you think of it as a feminist issue versus Alycia just has an insecurity of saying, here's what I believe?
That's an interesting question. I would imagine there's a lot of women who feel like I do. But it is, yeah, it's a Alycia issue as well. But I do think, the more you speak up, or at least for me, and I'm kind of, because you're saying maybe it's a female issue, the idea that more we speak up, it like draws attention to ourselves. Like, so for example, in the company I'm at right now, I started a women's group 6 months ago. And for all these like positive, empowering, like inspiring, motivation, like reasons. But there's this fear alongside of it that's like, well, what if like the conversation as a male and the leadership of our firm is like, wow, like these women are after our jobs. They want to get promotions. They want to get paid more, whatever. Like they want more seats at the table in terms of senior leadership. And that might not necessarily like, it's not necessarily what they might feel, but like it could be a little bit threatening if they think of it as like this group that's trying to, whatever.
Yeah. And would you, so on that note, would you agree that that threat is actually a healthy amount of stress? Let me, I asked it as a question and I'll give you my opinion and then as instead of like leading the witness. If you created a women's empowerment group within your firm and the most of the stakeholders or the executives are males and they feel threatened that, oh my gosh, my chair in the leadership may be overcome by one of these women or multiple of these women. To me, from the outside, I'm thinking, fan-fucking-tastic. That means that people are trying to vie to make it better. And if it's because it's a woman, okay, well, you've made it now a sex issue. If it's because it's just what's best for the organization and now they're going to bring in different dynamics that I have, well, either whatever it is, the organization benefits from it, right? It's like push. It's the healthy challenge.
Totally. And so that's part of what my mission has become, where like, I went about it very methodical and intentional. And I surveyed the women of the group. I asked what people wanted to talk about. And then I just recently did a survey about like the benefits, like what they've gotten out of the group so that I can share with the leadership team, like, here's what the benefit is for our employees, basically. So it's good for the company.
Yeah. Okay, so let me go back to the first question about is it Alycia? Because I also agree with your statement of, well, I know a lot of women that also have that issue. I'll speak for myself. That was an issue for and still is in certain areas, to speak what I want or say, here's where we're going. So when I heard you say like this is a feminine issue, I was thinking, well, I don't know if that's the case because I have that, and I would say that you probably have some version of fear of saying, hey, this is what I want and how I want to do it, and not doing it in. I mean, you and I are very alike in some of these ways. Sometimes, in order to wamp up the courage to do that, we become these aggressive assholes.
Sure, I've done that.
Right, as opposed to the way that I actually want to be, which is this compassionate, empathic leader that says, here's what I believe, here's what I'm seeing as capable. Can we all get on board and let's move there? Because I want this. Like, it's like the Martin Luther King, like this is what's capable in our world. And then boom, everybody moves in that direction. But staking your claim like that, I think it's across the board a scary thing, because it means that there's something to be shot down. There's something to be then ridiculed by, as opposed to, if I have no opinion, what are you going to get upset with me about?
Right.
I didn't say that I like the color blue over red. So you can't say that you like that one because I never said anything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, and I'm not trying to say that there's not a societal issue in regards to females and males. I think that there is. I think that there's unconscious biases. We kind of touched on some of these in regards to other minorities when we went into the BIPOC stuff. And so I think that's ingrained, but I also wonder how much of it is more of an individual. Yeah, if you get the hand gestures, it makes total sense. How much of it is an individual's insecurity that would actually overcome the societal issue? And then, yes, there is still a societal issue, but is that a smaller one?
I don't know that it's kind of like a chicken or the egg question at that point, because as you're going to, as a kid, like if we think as a kid, you're going out and you're putting yourself out there and you get feedback from your external world that this is inappropriate, this is wrong, this isn't the way this should be, and you get ridiculed or condemned or just corrected, then you're going to internalize that and now have a message. And now to overcome that internalized obstacle, how do you show up and who do you get to be? And so I think it's both. And I think that when you look at it from the societal, the large scale, it becomes more challenging even, because now not only are you needing to overcome your individual thing, but now you need to overcome, well, as a group, women are going to be faced with this obstacle from men because it's going to be, tried to be corrected. It has never been done before. And those are typical responses. And so then who do you need to become as an individual to fuel a different response to that obstacle? And it doesn't always necessarily have to be as aggressive, like Lyndon said. Lyndon and I go aggressive when we're faced with needing to be courageous and overcome some kind of fear. That's not the only option. And so when women go and do an empowerment group like you're saying you're doing, even in your description, you were very careful to gather all the information, interview all the people, find out what the benefits are, take it to the leadership, make it completely obvious what you're doing and provide the benefits, because if you didn't, what would you expect to have happen?
Well, I had like another woman even say this to me, because it was a fear I had, but I wasn't sure if it was validated by anyone else. And I talked to this senior leader in our firm who told me at first she was unsure if she was going to come to any of the meetings. And she gave it a try and like figured out what I was about and what we were doing. She goes, I think you're doing a great job. She's like, my fear was that it would be like this man hating, man bashing, whatever it is. And I'm like, absolutely. I want to do everything I can to eliminate that from happening. It hasn't happened, but just the idea that could be a perception of what this group is about is part of what is in our psyches just as a whole, right? Because like you're saying, if somebody's thoughts are the opposite of patriarchy is matriarchy or whatever, then there could be negative connotations associated. So
yeah, that's great that the female executive said something like that, and it reminds me of, I always think it's so ironically funny when you see somebody that's like a hippie, they're wearing their tie-dye and they're kind of that persona, and then they talk about hating the government or hating this. You're like, you've missed the idea of what being a hippie is, which is, I just love everything. I can find love for anything and everything. And instead it's become, I love this and that, and in order to love this, I have to hate something else. That to me is so, it's a bastardization of the point, right?
Totally. And I think since like certain messages do get blown up, and that's like the world we live in, like that's where the timidness comes, which I don't know, I can't speak for all women, but like a lot of times people who are super outspoken or like really passionate about something that become really popular can be very polarizing. And it's like, a lot of people don't like certain things certain people say. So it's like, how do we do this in a way that's like or at least for me, like in a way that like supports the company, its staff, and then, you know, what I care about, I guess.
Well, I would have to say congratulations to you for having the fear of putting your opinion out and then formulating a group of women that are essentially formulating an opinion. And I'm assuming you've created some kind of charter or mission reason for being together, which is, I would guess if you're the founding member of it, it's got a lot of your blood and tears and beliefs in there. So way to go. That's really cool.
Oh, thanks. No, it is really cool because I feel like I was hired to do one thing, and like that's my job, right? Like I have to do that and do it well. But then there's these other parts of me that seek fulfillment and like that I feel passionate about, that I'm fueled by anger. So at one point I was like angry that we didn't have something like this already in existence. And about a month or two goes by and I'm like still angry and nothing has happened. I'm like, or Alycia, you can do something about it.
Nice. So what are you thinking, or how are you thinking? Because you said right before the podcast about incorporating men into it.
Well, so like I had multiple like of our senior partners be like, I would casually mention like All Worth Women or whatever, and they'd be like, wait, what? Like apparently I've not done a great job at communicating to everyone what it is and what we're about. So I thought, part of being a feminist in my mind is being inclusive and the idea of inclusivity. So I wanted to create like a space or a venue or an opportunity for the men who also believe in the mission and the vision, or are curious or want to learn more or what have you, to invite them into it so we can, because I believe we're stronger together as opposed to like, you're over there and we're over here and like, cool. So that's where I was talking about, like, maybe you guys could help me think through that, because so far all I've really gotten to, I've asked like some men on the team where it's like, they're like, well, I don't know if I think I would want to join and just be an observer, but not necessarily like be put on the spot or want to have an opinion necessarily, because they're of the mindset too, like they're probably scared to speak up as well. So it was good feedback, but I don't know. That's where I'm at. And right now it's all virtual. So it's even more like pressure to be like on screen. It's not just like a cocktail reception or something.
I think you're right in going, or what their request is. I would be nervous in an all-female group if it was a women's empowerment group, as to what is the purpose of me being there. Am I now the target of something? Like, am I the embodiment of all males? And so any upset you have, it's going to be, can you, Lyndon, account for why XYZ happened in my life, or why XYZ isn't happening in society? And it's like, whoa, I wouldn't be into coming there. So I could see that on me.
Sure.
and walking in. So to be sold into it, it would be based on what I liked what you said earlier about part of our value is the inclusivity. And so what we're trying to do is being able to understand one another better. That'd be great.
That's such an incredible response to me, because it goes like directly to the fear of feminism means that it's going to take something away from me or put me in a position that I don't like automatically. Like the first thing that came to my mind, I mean, granted, I grew up differently than you. Feminism was huge in my house. And so like becoming, what does a male feminist look like? It looks like, I think I'm a male feminist. I think that giving women the choice and the opportunities that are available to everybody else is amazing. How to be an advocate, I'm still learning how to do that, because like part of me goes to like kind of the opposite of what Linda's going to, is like, oh, I need to give something to these women because they don't have what it is they need. That's bullshit too. Like, I know that's bullshit as soon as it comes out of my mouth, but I feel it, right? So how do I participate? And then asking for some education. But the part that gets me is I'm learning I'm learning to be an advocate for other things and marginalized peoples, is that it's not the responsibility of the marginalized person to train and teach the majority. It's just not. So who do I need to be to now advocate for the equality and the alignment in my values with the alignment in yours? So I think it ends at the same point that Lyndon ended. What are the values that you're putting forth, and how do I learn more about that? And that would be the invitation, rather than invitation to membership necessarily right away.
Mhm.
Hey, we want you to be aware of what's going on. This is what's going on. This is why we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like that response to being invited is exactly my fear, right? Where it's like, so that is good because, yeah, it's like unfounded and founded at the same time, where, like you're saying, Andy, in order for men to become advocates, they have to understand what it's like to be in our shoes, like what you're saying with the safety thing that Karen brought up. Like,
Yeah.
I would imagine like 95%, if not more, women feel unsafe once a day, if not more. And that's just part of our DNA because we're smaller in general. But if we never told you that, you would not know. And so you would never be able to consider what it's like from our point of view. So it's both parts to have that conversation of like, here's what it's like for us. And then you're like, oh, interesting, you know, and vice versa. But yeah, it's a tricky one to, especially in a business setting. But, you know, I think that like there's been some meetings where, like, I think it was our launch where I shared different studies about like simple things, like not just like, oh, we don't get paid as much or stuff that everyone has heard, but simple things that like women don't apply for as many jobs as men do. And in fact, I found this study from LinkedIn, because, you know, they do a lot of job postings, that like women actually do get hired more for different positions, but it's ourselves that kind of limit us in terms of like, oh, I don't hit all the qualifications on the thing, or it says 10 years and I have 8 or whatever. And you kind of like prevent yourself sometimes. So there was things that we talked about that's just issues as a general. It's not all like societal issues that say this, so blah blah blah, like, you know, it's more just learning about ourselves. So I wonder if maybe it could be a little bit of that too, like it's here's what the group is about and what it's for, but then this is also like kind of the state of the industry, and especially in our industry, and then also like, you know, jobs in general, I guess.
How long have you had the group going?
Our 6th meeting will be this Friday, so 6 months. We're doing monthly.
Nice. Wow.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
And this Friday one is a fun one. I'm doing a summer pop-up virtual event.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What
I
does
don't
it
want to.
mean? You
What?
don't want to spoil it. Okay.
Oh yeah, all the listeners, for all of the women at my company who are listening. But no, so what I'm gonna do, so we have like a really cool podcast studio, a radio studio at the office actually. And I was watching last week some of our guys record something, and it literally is like a news studio. And I'm like, I want to do this. How can I get it? And I'm like, the women's group. So I'm gonna be like a news anchor type person. And I'm taking us on a cruise where we're going to go around the world. And then I'm going to show videos of like celebrity chefs teaching us like cuisine from different regions. That's my virtual event.
Wow, that's cool.
Fancy.
It's going to be fun. I'm going to pretend like we're like boarding the cruise, and then we have to go to Italy now. So everyone has to get back on the ship and stuff.
So you said something, Andy, and then Alycia, you commented on it too, about the walking to in a parking lot and having fear for your safety. And Alycia, I agree with you. There's like, and we talked about this actually when we were talking about testosterone and the Olympics and whatnot, of like pound for pound, on average, women are not as physically strong or physically fast as a male. And so in that situation, which one would you be more concerned about? Well, the female would be of more concern because they don't have as much of a physical ability as a male does, on average, pound per pound. There are some fucking badass women out there, for sure, that could kick the shit out of me, right? And so I don't know what my question is about that, but there's something in this idea of feminism, and I kind of stated about it earlier, of what is an upset that women have that is being, and or even males have, about the society's idea of feminism or the matriarchal society, that there is a biological difference between the two, but we're placing the idea that it's a societal construct that is the issue, as opposed to there's a difference in biology, or there's a difference in quality or characteristics, or something along those lines.
I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think it just has to do with like having been exploited for the fact, as opposed to just like the fact is the fact. You know what I mean?
Tell me what you
Like
mean.
if I don't have all the stats and I'm not an expert on this, but I would imagine that like women are more targeted for certain types of things, being the smaller gender, right?
Sure.
So when you take something like that, where you like historically are like, okay, like you hear about like rape as a kid and this like sexual assault and things like that, where you're like, okay, this is something that's a threat to me. So it's just something that's like part of how you think about your day, or, you know, grocery shopping or going on a date or whatever, like these things that are just part of our decision-making process. Not necessarily that it's like we want, I don't know, I get what you're saying, where it's like, why would we say that's a bad thing?
Like what you're saying. So let me see. My question, or my pondering that I'm hoping that we keep talking about, is formulating as you're talking about it. And I would say, as Grace grows up, yes, I definitely want to educate on what she's capable of and what she's not capable of, and and for her to learn what those abilities are. And let's just talk about physical safety. Like,
Yeah.
In a dark alleyway, you don't think you're always going to be safe, period, right? Especially when you're alone. That would be a bad idea, right? I think a guy could, I would tell that to, if Bodhi were around, I could tell that to Bodhi as well. I probably, just speaking off the cuff here, off the top of my head, I probably would have less of a concern for my son as opposed to my daughter, because I have this idea that if they're on average, then Bodhi will be able to physically handle himself more than Grace would be able to handle himself.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that seems like a really smart thing to speak to.
Mm-hmm.
Not to like try to limit her physical abilities, but to have them both understand, well, what are their physical abilities, and how does that then relate to their physical safety in certain situations. So how do you incorporate that with the feminism, this feminist movement, and if we just stick with the physical safety, how do we incorporate those two together?
Well, I don't know. I think there's a lot of things swirling in my brain, but like the idea of like, I think Andy referenced this in a couple episodes, where it's like, we're learning that there's more of like a spectrum as opposed to just like male and female, and that's it. There's all these different permutations of like mixtures that people identify as, and we're learning more about what that is for everybody, and everyone determines that for themselves. And now that more people are willing to speak up about who they are, now we have more information about it. So I think that like in general, like I can only speak from my point of view being a straight woman, right? So like that's my point of view. But I think if you had all different people along the spectrum, they would all offer their own perspective to have a more like inclusive conversation about what that looks like for their particular issue. Like I'm imagining, you know, a gay man might have similar tendencies or different thoughts that drive his decision-making process because of what he's experienced in the world. But for me, like being 5'4", you know, it and smaller-ish, I used to be smaller. But if you go through like certain decision-making process, like you're saying, like it's not bad to tell your daughter to be safe. Like my parents, and you guys both know this, I think, like they were like safety freaks, and like it still to this day, like I'm a safety monster just because I feel like it's so important. But and I also have girlfriends who are not as worried about stuff. It's like your upbringing too that plays a factor in how you see the world. But yeah, it's interesting because I don't necessarily think it's like it's something that's like a feminist issue necessarily. It's just more of like a fact of the matter that like some women being smaller in stature make more of their daily decisions based around, you know, physical safety, and some don't. But it's just something that's more common, I would imagine.
I think another approach to looking at it would be maybe looking at either a different context, but it's about the choice and the consequence, I think, to allow the person that you're teaching or wanting to inform about how to approach their own safety is to give them a clear understanding of what that looks like, what the consequences could be, and then what their choices would be to then enter a situation where it would be less safe. Like you're talking about going down an alley. Yeah, these are the consequences. This is some of the things that can happen. So who do you want to be and how do you want to live your life to either be able to make that choice to walk down that alley or not? And there's a whole bunch of things you can do. There's physical safety classes, there's working out, I mean, where I think it becomes a feminist issue is when someone else tries to control the choice and take that away. Like, no, you can't go down an alley because it's unsafe and you don't know any better because you're a stupid woman. No, that's not it. It's, look, I have a concern for you. You're my daughter. These are the things that happen in the world. If you want to make a choice to live in that kind of risk, I'd like you to be prepared. And these are some of the options, and invite them into a choice.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's certain things that are just a reality of the world that, like, if your group, let's say, was exploited for something, you'd probably be more hesitant to do that thing, you know?
Yeah.
But knowing that it exists helps, because then you could make the decision for yourself. Like a girlfriend of mine doesn't even lock her door. She's like, it's just not something I was raised in. It doesn't bug me. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you all know Cassie. I'm the door locker in the house. She went down to Costa Rica last 2 weeks ago or whatever it was, by herself. Well, not by herself, but with Grace. International travel to a third world country. Like, she has no hesitation about it. I know her mom was also quite a badass from the stories that I've heard about her. She was one tough chick. So yeah, I guess there's a story that I have in my mind, which may be a fabricated story that's more of like a, hey, society thinks this, but then when you talk with any individual, this isn't actually what goes on in their mind of like the feminist movement of, or the idea that a feminist would say, well, you don't have to deal with walking down dark alleys and being scared for your life. Like, no, I fucking walked around dark alleys, and I'm walking around parking structures at night or any place. I always have a bit of I'm just gonna watch myself here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be foolish. I think I could handle it by way of just getting the fuck out and running. But there's this like, I don't know. And again, this could be just a saying that's not even felt on any individual level, besides maybe some people that are extremely upset and accusatory of, they're angry that they have to deal with this injustice that is being put upon them. And I have this thought of, there's no, that's a victim mentality there. That's a woe is me, you're wrong for making me feel some way, as opposed to exactly what you said, and what you said, Alycia. I'm 5'4" and I'm small, so I should not go to battle with anybody in a dark alley because I'm 5'4" and I'm small. Like, that's just, if we don't know what you're going up against, that wouldn't be a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Even me at 5'11" and I'm
So,
small, lean, I wouldn't want to go up against anybody. But that's a Alicia's personal empowerment move, or Lyndon's personal empowerment move. That's not a, society has forced upon me that I'm a woman and I'm weak and I'm feeble and I'm stupid and therefore I shouldn't go down that. No, it's like a, hey, here's a smart thing. Don't go down dark alleys.
Yeah, but I think that, and I know you're just using this as an example, but like the dark alley thing, like, I think the point that like is probably missed is that it's not just that, it's like anywhere mostly. Like most times we have this like certain amount of stress, or at least myself, that like is acutely aware of like those differences that like drive my decision. Like I might go to a different grocery store past 8 p.m. because it's like, well, that one's a little bit sketchier or whatever. And like some people probably will, like men probably would do the same thing, but it's a lot more ingrained in our decision making than just like dark alley, no dark alley. You know what I mean? Like even little decisions, like, should I take the trash out right now? Like it's kind of late. Like, I mean, your neighborhood's pretty safe, but like I'll just wait till it's daylight. You know, little stuff like that.
Yeah, very good. Karen does the same thing. I think there's a when
Do
we
you
start,
get mad at her when she doesn't take out the trash when it's like 2 p.m. in the afternoon? She's like, it's 2 p.m.
No, I don't.
You can't use that one on me.
No. There's a, when we get to the generalization of saying that society has put this upon me, I get what you're saying. Like there can be a victim mentality, but I also think there is a sad truth to the fact that this does happen. The women have been attacked, raped, and murdered just walking to their car after work. And there's a need to think about it. And that need to think about it is regardless of size, is regardless of most things other than gender or how you identify as a human being. Like women are victims of it, homosexuals, any gender can be victim to it. So there's certain ones that it's more appropriate for them to feel unsafe. And then it's kind of like the whole victim triangle, right? Because it gets perpetuated and accentuated. There's the victim that it happens, and it's an actual victim, and it's whatever. And then there's a rescuer who now needs to protect and save, right? And then there's a persecutor who needs to go after and make evil this other thing, and it limits the opportunity and the choice for anything else. And so moving from these scarce options to more abundance of options requires a conversation about it, which is what I think is really amazing about this conversation is we're seeing where, you know, Alycia as a woman has a particular way and a particular thought process to dumping out the fucking trash. Like, wouldn't cross my mind at all to not take out the trash at 1 a.m. in the morning. other than it would probably make noise, and I don't really want to do that to my neighbors. So like, but it's just fucking fascinating. And like, so where is the line then, right? Where's the line where we get to offer up solutions and be advocates to support the forward progress of the conversation? That's still confusing to me. And then how do we not make women victims in their story, and offer and create an opportunity for choice? Like, it's challenging to me.
So Alycia,
Lyndon.
how would us as men help create a feeling of equality? And let's stick with the physical safety one, since that's been our example.
Mhm.
How would you feel empowered in regards to your physical safety? And I think incorporating what we're talking about, which is a conversation and being what would be introduced to some choice. How would we create that feeling of equality?
Well, there's like different things that come to mind, and like obviously I think different people would have different opinions, but what's coming to mind for me is like there's different scenarios, right? So like let's say you're with coworkers and like I was newer to the company or something. Like, there might be a level of like discomfort there if you're like, oh, like, hey, step into my office for this meeting. I'd be like, I don't know. Like, it would be a little bit like, I need to get to know you, whatever. And we were talking about that before we started recording, where it's like, there's this, that even comes into play in that scenario. So it's like, oh, maybe you offer like, would you prefer we have a meeting over here or over there? Or like, would you want to meet at Starbucks for an interview? Or, like public places, like incorporating the person's preferences into like into account. And even like that would be like the working world, or like with like dating. Like sometimes in the past when I was dating, it'd be like people would suggest like certain things, and I'm like, I am not at all comfortable doing those things. And obviously we have to speak up for that. But like if you were actively dating, I would encourage you to like pick a public space and like, things that are like very more like people are around and not in the middle of nowhere and what have you. And then as far as like if you were like a partner, like or a friend, like offering to walk someone to their car, or like I remember one time an ex-boyfriend gave me mace. I'm like, as funny as it was kind of silly, but I was like, oh, he cares about my safety and like wants to make sure I feel safe when I'm alone or whatever. Like little things like that, just asking, I think would be helpful. Like you could say to your women friends, if you cared about certain things, like you could ask them what makes them feel safe. I don't know.
I like it.
I'm definitely going to think about that one though, because I don't think anyone has ever asked me that.
Yeah, well, because this conversation, and I'm trying to think of where I'm having my own prejudices, or and much of which are unconscious to me, of how I'm treating, let's just say I'm treating Cassie.
Mm-hmm.
And even with bringing it to light of, hey, you're not creating a choice. There's a moment, there's been this void of, okay, so now what do I do? How do I respond? How do I create the space of equality, as opposed to continue to propagate this unconscious bias that's just inbred through society, because it's just in our cartoons, to our news, to our workplaces, to our social jokes. It's just it's in there. You can't not say that it's not, right? So identifying it is one thing, but I mean that's like a booby prize. We need a new direction.
Yeah, I think it can be just as challenging, like when you're getting to know someone, like you brought up the dating thing. as when you go to have sex, like figuring out what each other likes and how to investigate each other's body and asking those questions. A lot of that is taboo, especially when you first get started as a kid, right? You're like, think you know everything, think you have to know everything. You don't talk. It just turns out really shitty. Like, yeah, that's my experience, but like,
mine was great. It was just really fast.
really fast. Like, did that even happen?
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. That's so important. And yeah, I mean, because the other thing I've been thinking of too while you're talking is like, there is this idea of like a societal issue that like you hear about, but then there's also things that like, again, can't speak for everyone, but I imagine, myself included, we've experienced as we grow up in our personal experiences. Like, just even if it's little stuff like your older brother, like, you know, showing his physical strength, you learn you are weaker early on, like through just think like playground and this and that. And like, you kind of take that into account, like subconsciously and consciously, like, okay, this doesn't work. Even if I really wanted to like push my brother down the stairs, probably couldn't, like, you know, or whatever. So you kind of incorporate that into like how you go about the living your life, you know.
So there was an episode in Outlander.
Full circle.
Yeah. Where, so Alycia, so that you know, the girl, the main gal time traveled through some rock back to like the 1800s, okay? And she was born in like 1950s, okay? And she's a doctor. So she is a bit not seen as normal because she is a doctor. I think it could have been even 30s, 40s, or 50s. I can't remember exactly. They barely ever go to that time frame. But she's a very educated woman, even in her time frame. And then she goes back 200 years, and now she is this, like, no women are seen as educated. They're all seen as that which brings me my child and my food, right? So anyway, her daughter then transports back, and she's transported from in Scotland, and then she has to go find her mom and dad, who are now in North America. And so she travels all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, and then she gets abducted by some bad dude, and she gets raped. And this was like the big thing, right? And then she finally goes and finds her mom and dad, her dad being James Fraser, and she is super angry because she thinks she should have done or could have done something, and she's pissed off and she's angry. I could have done something. I could have done something. I could have done something. And her and her dad, James Fraser, are going and walking around in the woods because they're picking up whatever berries or something like that. And he's just listening. He's not saying anything, and she's just ranting and kind of berating herself. And he grabs her and kind of like strangleholds her from behind and says, "Do anything you can to get out of this." And you can tell he is holding her, and then he throws her onto the ground, and he says, "Come at me." And she's furious at this point, and she comes at him, and he just grabs her and throws her down again. "Come at me." And she is furious, and now she has a rock or something. I thought she had some weapon, and she comes at him, and he just bats it away and pushes her down. He is some 6'3" hunk of burning love. So, but for the moment, he has this really heart-wrenching and very honest conversation with her, saying, there was nothing that you could have done. That was it. So now you have to deal with that hard truth, not the truth you were telling yourself of, I could have done something, I should have seen this, I should have taken all these cues, I should have punched him here, done that, screamed louder, blah, blah, blah. That's not the truth to deal with. The truth is you actually don't have an ability that could have gotten you out of that situation. because in this circumstances, that was a bad guy. And he's like in the entire season, he's the bad guy throughout the entire season, blah, blah, blah.
If she'd have read the script, maybe things would have been different.
Maybe things would have been different. So why I say that story is there's the
there's a hard truth that there was nothing she could have done in that situation.
In that situation. And so, but I love the idea of owning that while creating as much as, let's say for me and for you, let's say men in general, but let's just say you and I, and trying to create the space for choice.
Yeah, I think the choice part is the optimal thing. Like Andy was saying, like, here's how the world works. There's a certain truth to that. There's some sick weirdos out there, blah, blah. And here's your options. But now this is a perfect opportunity that I get to bring up The Bachelor. So thank you for that. So The Bachelorette, excuse me. So The Bachelorette, there's been 2 episodes this last season where Katie has talked about sexual abuse happening to her. And I don't think a Bachelorette has ever really talked about that. And she shares her personal experience. And what she said was exactly what you're talking about, Lyndon, where it was like, for a certain period of time, she blamed herself. And on top of everything else, the trauma that's happening to her is also feeling guilt for like feeling like it was her fault.
Right.
And so that she shares her journey into like sex positivity, which is almost full circle for where we were planning on going, where she started on The Bachelor as a contestant. And the things she brought with her, like in her entrance, because that's usually like, you know, you're first meeting someone, some of them do something crazy things. She brought like a vibrator with her. And like her whole joke was that like this goes everywhere with me, kind of blah, blah. And her whole message that whole season was sex positivity and like women should be allowed to whatever, express themselves however they want and blah, blah. And then it comes out that her reasoning for why she is the way she is now was because of this experience where she went through this trauma and she had to like regain and relearn what sexuality and expression meant to her in a way that felt honest to her, as opposed to this like traumatic, guilt-ridden event that like she felt like she should have avoided and should have known and all this stuff in the process.
Yeah. Wow.
I know, she's a badass.
Bachelorette is deep.
That's incredible.
I know, on ABC no less.
That's really cool.
It's about fucking time.
I know.
You know, and that it brings up another point about the choice part, right? Because in the moment, you may not have control. You may not have any way to stop what's happening. And so no matter what your choices were up to then, what happens. And from there, you have choices on how you handle it. And it sounds like she had to relearn and reevaluate and rediscover what all of that was going to mean for her.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know that in the moment. But there's a choice to take or make to continue moving forward. That's fucking phenomenal.
I know, it's wild. Yeah.
This is deep shit, man.
Yeah.
Alycia, you're amazing.
You're amazing.
I like it.
I never thought The Bachelorette would ever add value to my life. And I'm thankful that you're able to prove that wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that show with such a like psychoanalytical lens that if you love people watching, it's like the perfect place for that. On top of everything else. Nice. But yeah, to your point, it's like it's having someone's vulnerability and someone's bravery to have that discussion that allows other people to like learn from it and like grow from it. You know, there was this other episode of The Bold Type, which is another show I love, and they tackle some heavy issues too. And there was a guy on there who like was a journalist and they all work at a magazine. And I guess I'm like forgetting part of the story, but it was basically like he went on this date with this girl they ended up hooking up. And later it comes out that she was like, yeah, that wasn't fully consensual. And he was like, whoa, like I thought it was. And it was this whole conversation of like, there was no like explicit yes or no, but at the end of the day, she did feel like it wasn't. And he just felt like a complete piece of shit and all this stuff. And it was his journey through that. So it was really interesting to see like, you know, both sides of the coin, where it's like, I would imagine in 99.9% of hookups, someone is not like making you sign a piece of paper that's like, yes, I agree, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a weird thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a weird thing. Cool. Should that conclude our podcast? That was a we got to some meat right there.
Dude, it was really powerful.
I think we can allow her back on.
I would love that.
Yay.
You did good. You get a gold star.
Thank you. No, I'm so happy. Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Was it as horrible as you were anticipating?
No, I never thought it'd be horrible. I always wanted to come on. I just thought maybe we should have fought more. I don't know. That would have been fun, but that's okay.
Hey, screw you.
that was a little too deep to fight about, though.
I know, I'm kidding. I just think that like, I really love the idea that like we secretly don't get along, because that's really fun, but it's not true. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, our podcast is going to blow the shit out of yours.
Yeah.
So way more followers than just the two of you.
We'll even have more women not listening to ours than yours too.
You're definitely more consistent. I'll give you that.
Yeah, we are way more consistent.
On the weekend.
You're probably gonna have more than us in like 6 months than we've done in 5 years.
Don't you guys have like over 100?
No.
What do you guys have?
We have like 45.
That's pretty good.
We're at 12? No, 14?
Well, we'll get it. We had 7 listens to our last podcast. So yeah, on SoundCloud. That's pretty cool.
Hey-o.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, everybody. Good episode. Alycia, thank you very much for joining us. Andy, always a pleasure sitting and smelling you next to me. And
put on deodorant just for you.
I would right before we started, I put mine on. Alycia, you don't need any because you're just hanging by yourself. And Roxy can't smell anything anyway. All right, bye, guys. Thanks so much.
Hope you all get laid more.
Hope you all get laid more.
Bye.